hiring junior people into an organization, you shouldn't expect them to do the junior level role. You should expect them to be able to use generative AI to immediately perform at a second or third year level.
Fred is not only the CEO of Optimizer, but he's also been voted the #1 most influential PPCer for the last 2 years. And on top of that, Fred was one of the first 500 hires inside of Google. So he's well aware of the evolution of Google and all the many changes that it has been making since its inception. As you may be aware, Google has just run its Google Marketing Live for another year, and this is where it gives all of its announcements on the newest updates inside of the Google Ads platform. So what I want to do is I wanted to invite Fred on so that we could have a real in-depth discussion, not only about those announcements, but how those announcements are affecting businesses and what they need to be planned for and what they need to be doing inside of their Google Ads accounts so that they're ready for the upcoming changes inside of Google Ads. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you enjoy this interview with Fred. All right, and as you know, we've got Fred from Optimizer, who's not only from Optimizer, but for the second year running, I believe you were voted the #1 most influential PPCer. So the reason why I brought you on is because obviously many people be aware Google Marketing Live has just been in the previous weeks. So we wanted to have a bit of an open discussion. We're going to have a bit of a starting view on our opinions on some of the announcements, but then what we really want to get down into is for the business owner or the business marketing team who is running Google Ads, what do they need to be aware of and what do they need to do? So Fred, once again, thank you for coming on. I want to start with this. Google made a big announcement at the start of their presentation of Google Marketing Live, and there's this tagline of Google's AI advantage is your business advantage. And then they were really, really proud to announce that Gemini 2.5 topped every core metric on the AI web development board. As a business, what's your view on that, and what does that really mean?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it kind of makes me laugh.
Yeah.
When, the next day, I think Anthropic had an update and they were like, yeah, we just introduced a new Model 2 and it's once again the best.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think as business owners, you can switch from one LLM to the next and just chase the one that is currently the best one. But honestly, they're leapfrogging each other.
Yeah.
This is fairly common technology at this point. And you'll find the one that works best for you. And then one might be better for coding, one might be better for blogs, and you'll figure that out. But I have stopped trying to always be on the best and latest one because it is just going to take up so many cycles compared to me being actually productive. But that said, I am also excited that they keep improving it because it means the output they have is better. The hallucinations, they still happen, right? So I think that's still something we have to figure out regardless of which model we're using. But that was my take on that announcement.
One of the things I have noticed with the latest roll of Gemini, I feel like, and I'm just trying to remember some of our conversation because when you came on this channel last year, we're both talking about one of the main drawbacks of Gemini and Google's AI is it was too restrictive and very much in the sense that it was just trying not to offend anyone and they're kind of slow. But it feels like am I wrong in saying that they've kind of released the shackles a little bit and to really catch up to other players in the market?
Yeah, I mean, what's going to happen if you have the strongest lion in the room, but you've shackled it down? Like at some point, it's going to start pulling on those chains and it's going to actually show its prowess. And I think that's what Google is. And like we discussed last year, OpenAI was the coolest, but who invented the GPT technology? Well, it was DeepMind and Google. So, I mean, obviously they know what they're doing, right? So I'm not surprised. But and then in terms of like taking the actual shackles off, last year we were talking about how they were very conservative with putting humans in images. And so I was like, yeah, cool. You can generate images for your ads, but if there's no humans in them, I mean, we all know people like to see people and they like to see smiling faces. And if that's not in there, then how good is that? Now they've added humans, but no children yet. And again, that's one of the things where they're very conservative. They want to be safe. There's a lot of legislation being looked at. So they still have shackles, but yes, they are coming off slowly and that is making them better.
Yeah. All right. Hey, you were actually live at the GML event. Which announcement surprised you the most or that you got most excited about? Hello there, and I hope you're enjoying my latest interview. I just wanted to quickly let you know that all of these interviews are sponsored by my paid Google Ads community, which is called the Google Ads Mastery Community. I set this community up for one clear purpose, and that is so that I could provide people with direct Google Ads support, and we do this in 3 main ways. Firstly, we run weekly live calls, and these are live calls that are run in all different time zones so that we can get the support to you. And it's where you can actually ask myself and also highly skilled members of my Defined Digital Academy team direct questions about your Google Ads campaigns. We then also run monthly masterclasses, and these are in-depth teachings for what you need for success with Google Ads. And they don't only cover things inside of the Google Ads dashboard, we also cover specific training around things like offline conversions and how to increase the performance of your landing pages. All the important things you need for true success with Google Ads. And above all else, we've got our Google Ads community feed. And this is where you can join well over 300 other like-minded professionals like you. And we've got Google Ads specialists, agency owners, and also direct business owners who are there supporting and helping each other with how to see the best success with Google Ads throughout the year. And the best thing about this community is that it's all at a really low price because you can get full access for less than the price of a cup of coffee every day. And that's why I set up this community, is so that you can get tailored Google Ads support for a very low price. Right now, we're going to get right back into the interview, but if you'd like to find out more information about how you could join and plus also get a lifetime discount to join my Google Ads Mastery community, just follow the link in the description below.
Can I tell you a funny little story? This is not the stuff that the biggest announcement, but so I walked into the room at GML. So this was at the headquarters in Mountain View. I know they did different ones in different regions, but this is the one in Mountain View. And the first thing that I noticed is how fancy the chairs were. I'm like, you got like 400 or 500 people here, and these are different chairs from what we had last year. And they were so on theme with like the most modern design. I was like, whoa, Google's taking this really, really seriously. That kind of I thought was surprising. But then in terms of the announcements, it was a lot of AI, like you sort of already alluded to. And people are saying, like, listen, every time Google says AI, let's take a shot. Somebody put it out there, let's do a burpee. I'm maybe more in that camp, like, let's be healthy. But that was kind of the big one.
Yeah. No, I felt like, I mean, it probably went the way that I was thinking too, is I felt like they do this most GMLs, whether they will release, in terms of the product announcements, most of the things like, the reporting and PMAX, the AI apps, AI Max, all of those things have been pre-released. So you could kind of sort of see they're really, really positioning for a really big movement on AI.
Well, and that was the surprising thing, that we were pre-briefed and that there were pre-announcements.
Yeah.
AI Max and all the enhancements to Performance Max. And when I was in those sessions, I was like, guys, what are you going to announce at the actual conference that's going to blow people's minds and be super cool? And now kind of like thinking back on it, like I walked out of that session being energized and being inspired. And I think some of the videos that we saw and the fact that they were all AI generated, that's pretty impressive stuff. And we saw some demos around agentic, like I don't, if people didn't watch it, but basically there was this AI agent from Google.
Yeah.
And the presenter said, can you figure out why I'm not getting conversions in this new campaign that I just set up? And the agent looked at the setup and said, oh, well, it looks like you didn't install the tracking pixel correctly. And then it went one step further and it said, and I can see that you're using a Wix website. So would you like me to just go and install it correctly on that Wix website? And so then it goes into Google, it grabs the conversion code, it logs into your Wix website manager, it installs it. And that was pretty cool. I mean, if the agent, agentic AI, is able to do those types of things, that's really helpful for businesses whose core job is not marketing, because this stuff is complicated. You're going to make mistakes. Like even us, we make mistakes in this. And so to have an agent that helps you out, that I thought was really, really cool.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, we're going to get into some other business related stuff soon, but I did want to ask, obviously I've been to the GML events before, once in Australia, and you do have to take into account that this is their big sales pitch. Man, that's unashamed. Like all businesses, we have our free shop presentations where it's very much a sales pitch. Was there anything that ranked the highest on your sales pitch meter that you think was really only PR with no real benefit? I'm well aware that some of these announcements that Google make, I felt previous 2 or 3 Google Marketing Lives, they were very much making announcements that were, the capability wasn't able to be there to really back up what they were saying. But yeah, have you got anything that you felt was a bit of a sales pitch meter and it wasn't really a take-home win or message?
Yeah, and I think to your point, last year it was that opening demo by Philip Schindler where he uses his video camera on his phone and he's walking around and the AI is sort of figuring everything out. But then now a year down the line, we're actually pretty close to having that work. And more of that was shown at Google I/O. And I think the example that I just mentioned with the marketing agent that installed something on the Wix website, I think that was a demo. I know that doesn't work today. Yeah. So in that sense, yes, it is vaporware, but it is inspiring us about like where this all could be headed. And I think we are going to get there.
Yeah.
But that probably, and they saved that one for a last. So Nevin, I would say that probably was maybe the most PR worthy one.
Uh,
Maybe second, I would say, were all the videos. So
yeah.
almost all the videos that didn't have customers in them were AI generated. And that was pretty cool. I mean, that was sort of showing off how much you can do. But I think the reality behind the scenes when you start asking questions like, yeah, they spent many, many hours and obviously the budgets were lower to produce these videos and it
Uh,
is still less time than what you would normally spend. But to walk out of there and be like, hey, as a small, medium business, we can do this.
yeah.
Well, sure, you can, but you're going to have to make significant investments that you didn't do in the past. It's not like pushing a few buttons and it's done.
No. It's funny since the follow up. I think it was was it Wall Street Journal? It wasn't a Wall Street. They
Yeah,
released
they made it.
basically a video, an 8-minute video of how they did it. And when you actually look into look, it was amazing what they did. But when they went into the process and when they shared like the screen share of what they were editing in Adobe, you could just see the layers of edits. And they said, look, it definitely saved us time and it definitely saved money. But you still needed that level of, a video editor skill and those things to get the finished polish of what they were showing.
Exactly. So I think in that same post that you're referencing, it was something like they did 1,000 generations
Yes, that's the one.
for one specific scene.
Yeah,
And so it's cool because like ultimately you didn't have to shoot it, but yeah, you did have to reissue the prompt so many times. And this is sort of the cool stuff that I see happening in the Valley too. So people are figuring out how much can you push the prompting to
yeah,
do what you need it to do. Because I think for many of us, when we sit down at the terminal and it says, okay, now go and make a video ad. Well, it's like, I mean, I've seen good video ads and good
yeah,
commercials, but that doesn't mean I know what to ask for. And
yeah,
so even to get into the mindset of, well, ask it the basic thing you want, but give it to a prompt system or a basic chat and then say, okay, if I wanted to turn this into a video script, how would you say that? And then you start to see the layers coming in. It's like, oh, well, you described a man and a woman, but what about the background? Like, are they in a
yeah.
mountain background? And so all these things come in, and then you can start tweaking it. And so that whole process is still super involved, but it is also kind of fun, right? Because these are things otherwise we wouldn't have had the capability to do at all.
No, definitely. And look, I think it definitely it's closing the ground between what a smaller team can do to what a bigger team can do. But you still, it's as you're saying, it's just not a matter of just putting in a couple of prompts. You do need some level of, I guess, experience to really generate
Yeah.
what they're showing in the marketing scenes. All right. We've had a little bit of a chat just about Google Marketing Live. Now, I just really, really want this focus to be on, what does this mean for the everyday business owner, everyday in-house marketing team, even digital agency operators? From the announcements from Google Marketing Live, let's start with what are the biggest opportunities that you feel that businesses have, especially for businesses who are spending under $20,000 a month on their marketing channels?
Right. So last year, Google said they had the Power Pair. This year, they said that's already out. We're going to
Yeah.
rename it to the Power Pack.
Yeah.
And I think that actually may be the one that's most interesting to sort of these smaller advertisers spending less than $20,000 a month. And
Yeah.
specifically within that, PMAX is a big opportunity. And my thinking on that has shifted. So in the beginning, when PMAX came out, it was like this all-encompassing campaign with very few settings.
Yeah.
And I didn't love it because as a professional marketer, I want more control and I'm willing to invest some time and effort into making all of these things work really well. So then the question becomes then why do I have PMAX on top of this? And sure, maybe because I'm not a video expert, so it opens up a layer of
Yeah.
me showing up my ads on YouTube or maybe Gmail, which you had to run a different campaign for. So in that sense, I kind of got it, but it was still not super compelling.
Yeah.
But now, if you look at sort of the bigger announcement from Google was, well, there's AI mode, there's AI overviews, and like clearly these are fundamental shifts in how people search for things. It's no longer a
Yeah.
search engine, it's like an answer engine. People don't look at links anymore, they look at answers, they look at conversations.
Yeah.
And what you really have to understand from that is we've been conditioned to think about keyword marketing and putting in keywords, but keywords are going to go away. Like people don't use keywords anymore. People use prompts.
Yeah.
And you could make the argument that a prompt and a keyword, like, how is that different? They're words, right? They're words. That's
Yeah.
fine. But there is a different level of words. A prompt can be either really long, and so you can't encompass that in a keyword, or it could be really short, but it can have so much
Yeah.
memory attached from the history of that conversation with the chat agent that really short word prompt means so much more than it would have in a traditional keyword sense. And so what was really compelling to me is that if you want to play in this new world that we're shifting into of prompting, you have to use PMax, you have to use Search
Yeah.
Max, you have to use basically the power pack, you have to use broad match keywords, and all of these things that might have been a little bit that I would have pushed back on potentially in the past. I'm like, yeah, actually, we do need to do these things now.
Yeah, and just for anyone who wasn't quite sure what the power pack that Fred's referencing there, it's using combination in the same account of AI Max in your search campaigns, Performance Max, and then also Demand Gen, sort of everything bundled together in the same account. Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying there. I have been seeing for a long time coming, I think we'll mention this off camera, is that I think there's going to be a big spike in your traditional search campaigns, PPCs, and it's purely going to come off this factor. Because if you look at the moment, we've got, when people think traditional search, you've got 4 placements at the top, 6 at the bottom, all of those type of things. Whereas if it's getting into AI overviews with specific links that they only may be showing 1 or 2 responses inside of an answer. Plus, as you mentioned before, they're also going to be taking into account the user's search history, the user's previous prompt history. They'll know their buying patterns, all of those things from them. So if you're not using, things like video or to really get people interacting with you and your brand before they run that search, it's going to be there's going to be a big change in that market.
Yeah, and then, one interesting thing I just thought of here, but I was kind of expecting that, like every year, there's going to be this slide about the evolution of the consumer journey. And if you think back historically, that used to be like, oh, people have 10 touch points before they buy something.
Yeah.
They might read a blog, they go to a YouTube video. And I was like, now we have 150 touch points. And then it was like, now there's 300 touch points. And this year, that slide wasn't there. And you know why that is? It's because the touch points are going down, and it's all like converging back into basically AI mode. Like, why would you ever leave AI mode if that does such a good job of you finding the thing that you need? And sure, as consumers, we're still going to consume news, and we're still going to look at sports scores, and we're still going to go out to the internet for entertainment. But when it comes to finding something, like you kind of said, sure, YouTube and videos might compel you. It's sort of the demand gen, right? Like, you don't know what you don't know. So that plants the seed. But once that seed is planted, like, let me go and talk to my AI assistant, and everything happens there. And that's why I think, for one, that landing pages really should be dying. I mean, there's no place in the world for a landing page. Like, they suck.
Yeah.
They're not useful. They're a blocker to actually buying something. And keywords are going away. Like, all of this is converging. So I think to me, that was interesting.
Yeah, one of the interesting stats that I found interesting is that they actually said that it was in the initial address about how one of the larger growth markets for actual searches was actually Gen Z, so that 18 to 24 bracket. I think that comes off, but I would also say that when they're doing that search to very much validate a product or validate what they've already seen or find out some more information that's something they've firstly seen on a video or wherever it would be. Yeah, so it's going to be an interesting change in through there. You mentioned there about keywordless targeting. So let's just dive into that and AI mode. For those, I think in America, AI mode is pretty much active now. I think that's correct. I've already played around a VPN and seen it. It's going to be rolled out to the rest of the world in stages. Yeah, do you have any, I guess, predictions on how that's going to change, search behavior? Like, are you seeing that there won't be, where you're kind of predicting, I know it's always a hard thing to predict in the future, the role of keyword targeting in the future?
Yeah, I mean, so the big story that everybody wants to go to is Google dying because ChatGPT is a better quote unquote search engine, right? It's not a search engine, but it's a better experience for many people to find stuff. Now, the death of Google is overblown. Google showed stats that searches are actually growing, their monetization is good. But I think what we need to remember here, there's just a different way of consumers finding things. And ultimately, if you look back at all of Google's history, every time they improve the experience, people go and use it more. Something that's useful, you're going to go back and use it again and again for more things than in the past. And like, personally, the types of searches that I'm doing, I used to not go to Google and do the search because it was like, how do I express this complicated thing that I need? How do I remodeled part of my house. Something is in my brain about what I want it to look like, but I cannot put that in less than 10 words in a Google keyword. But then I sit down on my couch and I literally had ChatGPT in the voice mode. And I spent half an hour talking to it, and I gave it some photos of things I'd seen in the store, and I gave it a photo of my existing house. And I said, this is my vision. It's maybe modern, maybe this, maybe that. And it comes back, it's like, well, did you mean this or that? And so you start exploring. And again, that's the amazing thing where you need to go keywordless because otherwise you cannot capture this, right? And so when you look at AI mode, more people are going to be using this. It's going to grow Google's overall part of the pie. But the big question then becomes, if people stay in the AI mode, how do they interact with advertisers, right? And I think you have some takes on that too, right? Like in terms of
Yeah.
CPC are going to go up
No,
and
I agree. Because I mean, Google has released that in that AI mode that they will be putting in sponsored ads. I think also ChatGPT mentioned that they're going to be putting in sponsored ads in there. I guess probably my understanding / prediction would be that they're probably only going to give, in most cases, one, maybe two ad placements inside of that prompt or inside of that AI overview. And for me, that's what I sort of mentioned before, is that's where you're going to see businesses who are only targeting, your traditional exact match keywords. They're not even going to appear in those auctions, or the cost is going to skyrocket and it's going to make it unprofitable. So for me, that's why I'm a really, really firm believer in businesses do need to start investing in other things like display, like video, so that they're even in the conversation.
yeah. And like a really key point that a lot of people may be glossing over here is you need to use the AI enabled facilities of Google Ads to maximize your chances of being in AI mode or AI
Yeah.
overviews. So if you're not doing Search Max and if you're not doing PMax and if you're not doing broad match keywords, then you're just not going to be as eligible to
Yeah.
appear in these scenarios. So these are, and that's why this power pack, and it also includes demand gen, right? But that's
Yeah.
why it's sort of that top level of the power pack. That's why it's so important, because today this may represent a small portion of potential volume, but over time that's just going to grow. Now I had Ginny Marvin. She came into my studio here. We did a podcast together, so you can check it out on YouTube. But one thing she was equating this to was in the days of enhanced campaigns, but when Google was seeing like there's this whole trend towards mobile device usage,
Yeah.
and advertisers were just sitting on the sidelines. They were like, it's not important. I don't want to do the work. I don't want to make these new campaigns. And so eventually Google was like, well, if you don't want to do it, we're just going to force you. And everybody was upset. But look at now, like how much traffic, how many conversions, how much user behavior is on mobile devices. So, Google kind of did the right thing, getting us to where we needed to go. And I think we're at another one of these inflection points where it's just the user behavior is changing and you
Yeah.
either get on board or you fall behind. Now,
Yeah.
what's nice is Google is making Search Max a toggle that you turn on and off. I highly recommend when you have it in your account, you turn it on, you experiment, you see what the data says. PMax, like I said, I used to not be the biggest fan, but I completely see the place of it now. And especially if you're not spending that much money, like it's really the easy button. Plus, it gets you on all this new volume that's out there, right? All this new behavior. So
Yeah.
that's why I got to do it.
It's obviously broad match keywords, performance max. Those type of campaigns, obviously AI max when it's fully rolled out would be the same as well. It seems to be a pretty easy adoption for business to consumer. So you think like e-commerce brands, where there has been some resistance and where, I don't know if you've seen, but we've also seen some issues with results comes to where you're dealing with a business who is in a smaller niche within a bigger market. So there's a high volume in their search terms, but they're only servicing maybe the premium side of the market and B2B and those type of things as well. Like, are those recommendations the same for you in those markets, or should they be a little bit more cautious with their rollout in adopting these new policies?
Yeah, I mean, if it's been tough in the past, then certainly be more cautious, right? And I think with anything you do, especially in these early days, take advantage of the new metrics and the new statistics Google is introducing. And so, a lot of people probably weren't paying close attention to the GML event, but Google also announced that in Performance Max, they're introducing channel reports.
Yeah.
And you were able to do these in Optimizer before. There's some scripts that were out there, but Google is sort of taking that to the next level. So look at that. And then the other thing they announced is that for assets, so for like headline parts and description parts, they're adding metrics, all the metrics for all of these. Whereas in the past, it was sort of high level, kind of hard to make decisions with that. Now there's going to be much more data coming. And search terms data, that's also coming to PMax campaigns. So there's going to, we don't know how many of these are going to be undefined and hidden by Google.
Yeah.
But at least they said in the past, this wasn't even a thing. We just had search themes. Now we're going to go deeper. We're going to show you the search queries. So keep monitoring this, and especially if you're in a more challenging space, take a look at these reports. But I would also say a word of optimism is that if you've been having a tough time because it has been so hard to find the right market for the thing that you have, well, that really is the promise of generative search, is
Yeah.
that it will understand the users better and it will be able to show the ads to the right user more often. And I think within that comes the fact that CPCs are going to get more expensive. And that just makes sense because by the time Google drops someone to your website, they're
Yeah.
going to be much better pre-qualified. They're probably going to be a much better candidate to actually buy something from you. So by nature, that should be more expensive. Your CPA and ROAS hopefully stay roughly the same, but you'll get fewer clicks. You'll pay more
Yeah.
money for those clicks, and hopefully they'll be better qualified.
So, in your opinion, have you got one or two things that businesses start to either be planning for now or implementing now as a result of these changes and the changing nature of search?
Yeah, I mean, same things we've talked about. So I think the power pack, like turn on the search max mode, make sure your PMAX campaigns are set up. And then the one thing that maybe we haven't covered quite as much, but all of these innovations in video generation,
Yeah.
image generation. Google showed, what do they call it, like the creative suite or something? What was
Yeah. Create a studio, I think they're calling it. Is
Yeah,
that right?
exactly. So Creative Studio. And one question that I asked was like, is this going to work at scale? Because last year when they showed it, it was like, yeah, that's cool, but I've got 1,000 ad groups. Like, I'm not going to
Yeah.
sit there and do it 1,000 times. But now they even have a mode where it's suggesting. So it looks at, say, like your merchant feed, and it might come back to you with one of the opportunities, which I know a lot of advertisers don't love, and I don't love them personally either. But they might say, hey, it looks like last year you ran a seasonal promotion. It looks like this product might again be up for promotion. And so it's going to give you these pointers, or it might say, like, do you want us to generate a new image for this? Or look, here's a couple that we've already generated. Do you just want to approve them? And that's brilliant, right? Because now it's an easier, quicker workflow that helps you take advantage of what you're saying, which is the whole demand generation piece, which is we're not talking about search ads, we're not talking about generative chat, we're talking about just getting people to know about the thing that you sell and how cool your product is. And that requires videos, that requires images,
Yeah.
that requires being on feeds. And that stuff is also pretty complicated to manage, but it's becoming much easier.
One thing I did like as well, especially you mentioned it before with the ad asset level reporting, is that I was really, really happy to see when I saw it, is that Google is also giving the actual, clicks to ratio, conversion rates, all of those metrics for the automatically generated or automatically created assets as well. So you can actually see for people who are, a bit skeptical about, and in the cases I saw, of the 4 top performing headlines, 2 of them were automatically created from Google. So I was really, really happy with that clarity we're getting there. All right. Now, if we go through, like, is it too early at the moment to, I guess, give any recommendations for businesses? Should they be changing their approach to hiring in-house teams? So let's firstly deal on businesses who are running their own Google ads. Should they be hiring in, or looking to upskill in areas of video editing? What should be the next hires that they're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, so some interesting studies that I'm sure you've seen as well recently, but hiring junior people into an organization, you shouldn't expect them to do the junior level role. You should expect them to be able to use generative AI to immediately perform at a second or third year level, right? And so what that means is if you've never done keyword management, but to make a simple example, right? But you've never done keyword management before, like you shouldn't be spending a day building a keyword list. You should be figuring out how to prompt for that and get something back from AI in a matter of hours, and then very quickly upskill to that level of where a third year person would be performing at. And so that's kind of, if you go out for hiring, just asking people, what have they done with generative AI? And one thing I started doing in Optimizer with my teams is I've been telling them, like, I use AI for this and that, and I'm always giving them updates, right? But some people really don't adopt it because they might see it as, oh, it's a competitor to my job. So I said, a requirement, every time you have a one-on-one with me, you need to tell me what you did with AI that was successful and what you tried with AI where you failed and maybe didn't deliver what you expected. So it just gets people in the mindset of taking it to that next level, trying some of these things, actually deploying it for their jobs. And if I'm hiring new people, then that's certainly a skill that I would look for. Like, what have you done? It doesn't have to be PPC or digital marketing, but how have you taken advantage of these new technologies to do something you couldn't do in the past, right? And if you're not a professional video editor, but you've created a mini movie or you've created some cool ads, well, that's amazing. But right, because you figured out which tool to use. And there's so many tools to use. So just even figuring out which tool works, that's amazing. How to prompt for it to actually do what you want it to do, that's amazing. How to maybe start doing this at scale, right?
Yeah.
These are all the things you got to be looking for right now.
And for, do you see any, I guess for agencies watching this, are you, I guess, predicting that they'll need to change how they're structuring their teams? Because obviously, as we know, a lot of these things are going to be more and more automated, as you mentioned before. You shouldn't be spending a full day doing your keyword research. I remember, I think the biggest keyword research I did was for a really, really big company over here. I think it was like a 2-day keyword research to complete it all. They had a massive, massive string of products, but those days are long gone. Yeah. So I mean, are you thinking in terms of digital agency owners? Is there anything they need to look doing with their team structures, how they're hiring?
It's a really, really hard question right now.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a ton of answers on that yet. Um, but I'm thinking, I mean, so a couple of other stories. There's certain companies, I can't remember who it is, but they basically said we're no longer going to hire freelancers, because if you can work with a freelancer, and technically you shouldn't really be managing a freelancer to the degree of saying this is the work I need to be done by you,
Yeah.
and then give it back to me. That is basically prompting. So why would you not just prompt an AI?
Yeah.
And the other thing that we've seen in Optimizer is sometimes people prompt the AI, it doesn't get back a great result, and then they immediately give up. They're like, it doesn't work. But if you pushed it a little bit harder and you actually started prompt engineering, it could give you good results, right? So that is the skill we want you to deploy. So no freelancers, no like low end work. But then I'm also asking myself, what about quality review? What about sort of middle management, figuring
Yeah.
out the strategies? Like it's like when I have a question now about something like financial that I usually would go to my CFO for, generative AI gives me an amazing answer, and it's there any time of the day. So we're not dealing with time zone issues. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't grasp this one concept. Can you explain it to me better? And it's just so amazing, right? So it really does raise a lot of questions about who you put on your team and what is the value that they add. I think in an agency, when it's perhaps relatively transactional between you and the client comes and says, hey, we got a new promotion. Can you push the ads for that? I mean, that may not be the highest value thing that you bring anymore.
Yeah.
But what I've always thought agencies, what they bring is knowing what has worked for someone else and being able to deploy that for the next client. And so I think that still applies when it comes to figuring out which Gen AI, which model, which prompt, which data that we're going to give it works best for what it is that you need.
I think there's going to be a real switch in terms of the agency business relationship, and it's more going to be more of a done with you model as opposed to a done for you model. And that done with you model may actually be, the agency coming in and setting up the correct tools, setting up the correct prompts, setting up the correct systems, the AI systems. That there's essentially it's all automated. So I think that the agency model is going to move to more and more strategic approach as opposed to actually getting in and doing the keyword research, adding in the negative keywords, those type of things. I think those days are moving away very, very quickly.
Yeah, that strategic approach, that's really been the story for a long time, right? It's even in the earlier days of automation and scripts and basic machine learning. It was always like, we shouldn't be button pushers. We shouldn't be sitting, wading through spreadsheets. We should strategically think about what it is we can add to the client. And so I was talking to a few people at GML, at agencies as well. And so what they were saying was one of the biggest value add they bring nowadays is actually going and visiting their clients. And a lot of people got away from that during COVID. Everything became virtual. But they said, if I actually go to my client's warehouse or I go to their office, just walking around, just seeing how they operate, like that brings so much strategic insight where you can start connecting the dots with all of these complicated systems from Google. Because let's face it, like Google sometimes keeps talking about, oh yeah, PMax makes things easier, but PMax has so many settings, so many things you can do with it. Like it's not obvious for someone to know what that is. And so if you can be that one that connects the dots between the business, the feet on the ground, and how you can use digital marketing to grow that business, like that's really valuable.
Yeah, and I've always been, I reckon, saying a lot of time, for success with Google Ads or any digital marketing platform, you need to know two things. You need to know how the business works and what are the real drivers for success in that business. And then you obviously need to know how the platform works. And it's you've got to, so I think it's really that role of the agency to really, really understand the drivers of the business. And then if for an in-house team, It's more about they understand that they need to understand how to best leverage Google or whatever platform they're using for success for the business.
Exactly. So I think one thing we haven't covered here is the data connectors.
Yeah.
And so I was just working with my engineering team on some AI projects, and we said, can we solve customer support? And our customer support is, by the way, is very good. People love it because we have a lot of humans who dive very deep and give very good answers. But ultimately, those answers do take time to research. And so we said, like, could we actually use AI to do this faster for someone? And we're still going to have the humans validated, but why shouldn't you be able to go to a chatbot and get that answer? And one thing we started to realize was that this is a very difficult problem because there are so many things that a human would look at. They would dive into so many different systems that don't necessarily are connected to each other. But as the human, you are that connector and you put together the pieces. And so thinking about AI and like how good of a job could Google do in terms of figuring out the best bids, the best keywordless targeting, well, usually we talk about just connecting conversion tracking to it. But what about these other things? What about our margin data? What about the seasonal promotions? And these are so many things. And just figuring out, and this maybe is one of the things that agencies should actually hire for right now, is a data expert. Where does the data live? How do you connect it together? How do you feed it to the AI? And by the way, that's an evolving space too. Like, is it agent to agent models? Or is it MCUs, which are basically APIs for Gen AI? So all of these things have to be figured out, and it turns out to be a lot of work.
Yeah. Is there, from the announcements, obviously you're always updating and releasing new updates of Optimizer, but is there any sort of planned updates or planned things you're looking at changing to bring into that Optimizer platform as a result of GML announcements?
Yeah, just continue on the same vein. So we've been doing generative AI for quite a long time, but any of these new APIs, so especially the new data that's going to be available at the asset level, we can use that to do better ad text creative testing. One thing that we also haven't talked about much here, but Google did mention quite a few things about experiments. And so many things they're introducing, you can turn on as an experiment. So you don't have to, even with Search Max, you don't have to make the leap into it. You can just, AI Max.
Yeah. Well, we thought it was going to be Search Max. So I knew exactly what you were saying.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the listeners might have been like, "Oh, what's that?" Anyway, so with AI Max, even though it's a toggle, you can still say, "I want to toggle it on," but you run it as an experiment, and then only if it's actually performing better, then turn it on fully for me. And so we already have an experiment framework that keeps you on top of all the experiments that you're running. But I'm pretty excited about that because with all this new data from Google about assets, we should make it easier to do asset level creative testing through the experiments framework and actually not be guessing, but tell you this is legitimately working better. So that's what you should do.
And with that experiment inside of the experiment toggle, would that run inside a separate campaign, or is it running it inside of the current the current campaign inside of Google Ads?
Yeah, no, it's the Google Experiments framework. So I believe the way that they set that up, it's basically replicating that existing campaign and running kind of a clone of that. That they can get the data on the back end. They also introduced new incrementality testing, which now works as low as $5,000 budgets. So that's another big one for smaller advertisers. In the past, by the way, this cost $100,000 and up. So it was really out of reach. But now, if your business is even asking the question, should we be doing Google ads? Which is a legitimate question, right? Like, because you're going to make sales anyway. So how many of these sales are legitimately driven by search advertising? An incrementality test at $5,000 is going to prove it to you, right? So this is another type of one of these things where we just want to make it easier to jump into these things, but also stay on top of it. Because ultimately what ends up happening is you set up incrementality testing, and you set up 100 different ad text experiments, and then you just lose track. And especially if you're an agency and you have like dozens of accounts, we bring it all together on a single dashboard that just says, okay, these things are ready for you to make a decision on. You make the decisions. And then the next day you come back and it's got a bunch of other things, but you don't have to jump to every single account to figure these things out.
Hey, Fred, as always, it's an absolute pleasure having you on here. And for anyone watching, if you go into the description of the show notes, you can see where you can get in contact with Fred, but also see Optimizer and how it could potentially help your business. Hey, Fred, as always, a pleasure. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Aaron. Thanks, everyone, for listening.